Hey, Cornerstone. Today's Cornerstone connection is coming from Second Chronicles chapter 21. There have been many times where I've preached a sermon on Jesus healing somebody of an affliction or disease, and inevitably somebody from the medical community will walk up to me after that message and say, I think I can diagnose what they were suffering from. I think I know what disease they had or what ailment they were facing. This might be one of those passages where you're tempted to do that. Perhaps you're from the medical community and you look at King Jehoram's medical problem with his bowels and you're like, I can diagnose him. Well, I want to assure you, I'm not going to do a deep dive into King Jehoram's bowel problems today, much to your dismay, I'm sure. I want to talk about his spiritual problem. You see, King Jehoram was a sinner, just like every single one of us. He was a great sinner. We read here in verse 4 that when he ascended to the throne of his father, he killed all his brothers, and he even killed some of the princes of Israel. He wanted no competition. He didn't want to have anybody else vying for the throne. He wanted to be king. Furthermore, he was a guy who was just flat out evil. Look here at verse 6. It says, he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, as the house of Ahab had done, for the daughter of Ahab was his wife, and he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Ahab is one of the greatest villains of the Bible. And here's a guy who's walking in the ways of Ahab. He marries Ahab's daughter. He does what is evil in the sight of the Lord. And verse 11 says that he made high places all throughout the country of Judah. And he used his incredible influence as king to lead the inhabitants of the land into sin, to lead them into whoredom or idolatry. They are worshiping foreign gods and not the one true God. He's leading his people astray, and God will have none of it. God says, I'm going to judge you. And so what God ends up doing is he afflicts him with this incurable disease of the bowels. And Jehoram faces this incurable disease for the next 2 years. And it's agonizing and painful, and eventually it kills him. You see, the reality is we are all sinners, and we have this incurable disease called sin. But we have a God who does the impossible. God the Father sent his one and only Son into this world to wrap himself in flesh, to live a perfectly obedient life. Jesus never once sins, and then he goes on to die the death we deserve to die. Jesus dies a sinner's death. He receives upon himself the just judgment of God, far worse than anything Jehoram faced. God's wrath was poured out on him, and on that cross, Jesus absorbed God's wrath, became sin, so that sinners like us could be forgiven and set free. But that free gift of salvation only comes to those who recognize that they are sinners and cry out to Jesus to save them. Because the good news is that 3 days after Jesus died on that cross, he rose again in victory over our sin and offers the free gift of eternal life, the free gift of salvation to all who cry out to him. That's good news, church. We do not have to face the just judgment for our sin. We can receive the free gift of eternal life when we call out to King Jesus to save us. This Christmas, remember that God came down. He intervened and he did the impossible. He paid the full price for our sin so that we might live with him forever.